Democrats today take a step forward in their effort to enact legislation that extends protections for LGBTQ Americans. The House will vote today on the Equality Act. It's a bill that bans discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. Bloomberg law reporter Andrew Craigbaum joins us now from Washington, D.C. Hey, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us on this. What's in this bill?
This legislation essentially would amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to include discrimination to bar discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. And that would include, like you mentioned, areas like housing, public education, jury service, credit opportunities. It would also touch on public accommodations in places like restaurants, hotels, retail stores.
And look, I would imagine, given that everything in Washington is political, where does this fall on party lines?
So this bill did pass in 2019 in the House. It got a handful of Republican votes. Then it's expected to pass again today. The big question is what kind of GOP support it could get in the Senate, and I think that's still up in the air at this point.
Will it get any GOP support? And how much GOP support does it need in order to pass?
Well, it doesn't need a lot in the House. It got, I believe, 8 Republican votes last time. In the Senate, things are obviously trickier because that chamber split 50-50, and the filibuster is an issue. Mitt Romney, the Utah Republican, made some comments suggesting he had issues with the legislation in its current form. Supporters of the legislation said today that they are prepared to make this case to senators and really make the argument to them that this is overwhelmingly popular legislation with the American public.
So I do want to make sure I understand this. We'll get to how popular this is with the American public in just a sec, but I want to make sure that I understand what the battle is that it faces in the Senate. Because the Senate is split 50-50, but there is just the ever so slight Democratic majority because of Vice President Harris's vote. How much Republican support does this need to pass?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's going to need a handful of votes for sure.
Okay.
In the Senate.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the popularity outside of Washington, D.C. I mean, we're going to talk in just a second to our colleague Nancy Cook, and we're going to talk about the stimulus, which is very, very popular outside of Washington, D.C., outside of the people who actually represent the people throughout the country. Talk about the way that Americans feel about expanding protections for our LGBTQ plus Americans.
Right. So Joe Biden issued an executive order last month building on a Supreme Court case last year that found workplace discrimination protections under federal law also apply to LGBT workers. So supporters of this bill said that order was overwhelmingly popular with the American public. They say that that's also true for the Equality Act, and it has majority support not just from the public, but with Republicans as well, Republican voters, I should say.
How does religious freedom, the conversation about religious freedom, come into this? Because the measure also stipulates the Religious Freedom Restoration Act could not be used as a challenge to challenge a protection that would fall under the Civil Rights Act. Explain what's going on there and how big of a deal this is.
Right. So like you said, this bill basically stipulates that federal religious freedom exemptions can't be used to basically carve out exemptions under this law, and that's been one of the big complaints from critics on the right,
Right.
from conservative religious groups, going back to when it was debated and ultimately passed in the House in 2019. But you do have, on the other hand, a lot of progressive religious organizations making the case that there is a lot of religious support for these protections as well.
Andrew, we're going to have to leave it there. That's Bloomberg's Andrew Craigbaum. Hey, Andrew, thanks so much for your time and for joining us on this. Appreciate it.